So we're doing Honda Ridgeline axles. Real similar would be a Honda Odyssey or probably MDX. We got the vehicle up on a jack stand here. I'm going to take the front wheel off real quickly for you. And we'll set that to the side. So we're going to take our chisel and straighten out this dent so we can take off the axle nut. And to get the axle nut off, we're going to lock the rotor with the chisel. And in this case, we're going to use a 36 millimeter to loosen the axle bolt. And then we're just going to run it out with the impact. We're going to remove the chisel and we're going to take off the front caliper with a 19. Just going to let that be loose for right now, and I'm going to get some zip ties and we're going to zip tie this up. So and then we're going to pull this 12 off too here quickly. Set that to the side. And while we're here, we can disconnect the ABS connectors to the front strut, which is right here. Just take some pliers. There's one. And there's two. So that's disconnected, and then we will hang the front caliper, zip tie, and go around the front spring. So you try and position the caliper so that the brake hose is in a natural position and isn't being kinked or pulled in any direction. So now you come in here and you want to separate the knuckle from the strut. It's a 24 millimeter, and then I came in with a really long breaker bar and was able to break it loose by hand. And then you just come in by hand or with an impact and take it off the rest of the way, take the nuts off. And since these rotor retaining bolts aren't in, we're just going to go ahead and pull the rotor off because we can. We just removed the two 24 millimeter bolts, and it's freed this up, and then come in here with a screwdriver and you can separate it a little bit, work it free, and then finish tapping out the axle from the front. In no time at all, this is what you should be with, is the axle removed from the front hub, and then we can work on removing the axle from the transmission. This is the driver's side, so the axle is in the side of the transmission and it may leak a little fluid. On the passenger side there's an intermediate shaft, so replacing that axle will just be the inboard portion of the axle will be on the intermediate shaft bearing and it won't go into the side of the transmission. So I just want to kind of go over my technique for the driver's side. I take a flat bar and use it to pry between, so this would be the transmission case here. There's a little gap, and then the axle will be here, and then I just pry and pop the axle out. Works pretty well for this side. And there you go. And we got the drip pan underneath the car to catch the transmission fluid that will leak out. So I'm just going to come in here with a seal puller, and I'm going to pull this axle seal out and replace it. So this axle didn't have the dust seal for the ABS sensor. So what we did was we took a small pry bar with the old axle, worked baby steps all the way around, prying it off, and then we checked fitment on the new axle and made sure that the axle diameter right here was correct. And we just gently tapped all the way around and installed the dust seal on the new axle. This shows the new axle seal already installed. You can take a extension, just gently tap around the edge. You can take a chisel or punch, just lightly tap. Don't put one end in further than the other, or you can use a large diameter socket with an extension on it, and then that will give you some reach for your hammer, so you can just gently tap it in. So now we're going to go ahead and install the axle. Cake. And then we're going to focus our attention about getting it installed into the hub. So with a little effort, you can get the axle installed in the hub, and then also align the knuckle with the strut, and then we'll work on aligning the knuckle with the bolt holes in the strut itself. With the axle in, you can put the axle nut and thread it on and pull the axle through if you're having any trouble, or just go ahead and put the nut on, and then from there we are going to use a chisel to force the knuckle down and to align the 24mm bolts that go through the knuckle and the strut. So we'll work on that right now. Start with the top. So here we use the chisel, the fat end, to get the top bolt aligned. For the first bolt, you may need to use the thin end because the alignment will be off so much that you can only probably squeak the thin end of a chisel in, and then use it as a pivot point to pull the knuckle in and down, and then you can put in the first bolt. First bolt I did was the bottom one, the second bolt I did was the top. So after you get the bolt started and tightened down, you want to hand torque this. Before we put the rotor on itself, we want to probably just go ahead and take a wire brush and knock down some of this rust here. I'm going to put the rotor itself on, and we're going to align the rotor retaining screws so that way we can put those on without having to pull the brake off. Because she didn't have them, we'll put those on at a later time. So we're gonna cut the caliper loose. And then just double check the pads are seated fully. Move this to the fully seated position, and then slip the rotor on and start the top bolt. And there we go. And do the same for the bottom. Get that bolt started. And then tighten them down. With that done, we can put the chisel back in the rotor against the brake caliper, and then we'll be able to tighten the axle nut itself with the 36mm again. So we'll take our chisel, punch, and just tap the edge of the axle nut. So with that in place, we can just scrub down the face of the rotor. So we're just going to hand start all 5 and then tighten in a star pattern. And you want to bring them down a little at a time. Make sure the wheel gets down nice and even, and then you can do your final torque. This is the passenger side. I just want to quickly show you. I came in at an angle and with a long screwdriver, pry bar, and a sledge, and just gently tap this out. Let's see. I can come in right like this and just tapped it out, and it popped pretty easy. So no big deal.